Millionaire brought his simple secretary to a business dinner, froze when she arrived like a goddess. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the main characters. Meet Brian, a millionaire businessman who had built his empire from the ground up. His life was all about efficiency, organization, and results. He had it all: money, power, and the respect of his colleagues. But when it came to personal connections, Brian wasn't quite as skilled. He kept his relationships strictly professional and often kept his distance from those he worked with. His secretary, Emma, had been working with him for several years. She was punctual, hard-working, and had a calm, down-to-earth personality. Brian often referred to her as simple, not in a mean-spirited way, but because she had a way of blending in with the background. She didn't seek attention, didn't wear flashy clothes, and didn't try to stand out in the office. Emma was just Emma. But that all changed when Brian invited her to a high-stakes business dinner. It wasn't the sort of event where one would typically bring a secretary, especially not someone like Emma, who had never shown interest in the high society scene. However, there was something about the event that made Brian rethink his usual approach. Maybe it was the way Emma had been helping him with the event preparations, or maybe he just needed someone he could trust in a sea of unfamiliar faces. He decided to invite her. The night of the dinner arrived, and Brian was as prepared as ever. He donned a sharp suit and made his way to the venue, ready to make some big deals. Emma, on the other hand, had spent the entire day worrying about her outfit. She knew that this was a different type of event, one that required more than her usual office attire. After consulting with a close friend, she settled on a simple yet elegant evening dress, nothing too flashy, but just enough to stand out. As they arrived at the venue, Brian couldn't help but glance at Emma. Her dress was understated, yet it hugged her figure perfectly, and her natural beauty shone through. When they entered the grand dining hall, Emma's presence immediately caught the attention of everyone in the room. It was subtle, but undeniable. Her quiet confidence and understated elegance created an aura of sophistication. Brian, who had always prided himself on being composed, suddenly found himself frozen in place. He had never seen Emma like this before. She looked nothing like that simple secretary he had known for years. She was now the most graceful person in the room. Brian, for the first time in a long while, was caught off guard. He couldn't tear his eyes away from her. Emma, unaware of the impact she had made, walked gracefully into the room, greeting colleagues and clients with her usual politeness, completely unaware of the stir she had caused. As the evening went on, it was clear that Emma had become the center of attention, and Brian couldn't help but feel a mix of pride and confusion. This was the same woman who had always been quiet and humble, and yet, she had completely transformed into someone who commanded the room. For Brian, it was a moment of realization: sometimes, the most unexpected people could have the greatest impact. I had never seen Emma like this before. The way she carried herself was entirely different from the quiet, reserved woman I knew at the office. It was almost as if she had stepped into a completely new persona, confident, graceful, and undeniably captivating. I couldn't help but feel a sense of admiration as I watched her mingle effortlessly with the other guests. She spoke with ease, holding her own in conversations with executives, investors, and even some of the most influential people in the room. It was like she belonged here, in this world of luxury and high-stakes business, even though she had always been just my secretary. As the night progressed, I couldn't stop thinking about her transformation. Was this the same woman who had spent years quietly typing up reports, scheduling my meetings, and never asking for anything in return? There was so much more to her than I had ever realized. It was both humbling and eye-opening. I had always thought of Emma as simple because of her lack of pretension, but tonight, she was anything but. She was standing tall, exuding a presence that commanded attention, and yet, she did so without any effort. Her confidence wasn't loud or brash, it was subtle, elegant, and powerful. I found myself feeling slightly uncomfortable. How could I, the millionaire businessman, who had seen and done it all, be in awe of my secretary? It didn't make sense. But as I observed her from across the room, interacting with the others, I realized something. It wasn't just her beauty or her grace that had drawn everyone's attention. It was her authenticity. Emma wasn't trying to impress anyone. She wasn't trying to fit in. She simply was. And in a room full of people who were all trying to outdo each other, that was what made her stand out. It was a quality I hadn't even noticed before. As the evening wore on, I had moments where I tried to speak with her, but each time, it felt like I was interrupting something. She was in her element, captivating everyone around her with her charm and intelligence. And I couldn't help but feel a little out of place. This was supposed to be my night, my chance to network, to secure deals, and to show my worth. But all of that seemed irrelevant compared to what was unfolding in front of me. For the first time, I began to see Emma in a completely new light. She was not just my secretary, she was someone who could hold her own in this world. Someone who could command respect and admiration without ever asking for it. I didn't know if I was more amazed or intimidated. But one thing was clear, I had underestimated her. And the more I watched her, the more I realized I had a lot to learn from her. By the end of the evening, I was no longer the one leading the conversation. It was Emma. She had become the focus of the room, and I, the one who had invited her, was merely a spectator. It was a strange feeling. And as we left the event together, the quiet drive back to the office was filled with a new understanding between us. I had always seen her as a simple secretary, but now I saw her for who she truly was, an incredible woman who had the power to change everything. And I was certain that the next chapter of our relationship was going to be very different from anything I had ever expected. The next few days were different. Emma, my secretary, had always been a constant presence in the office, but now, something had shifted between us. There was a certain unspoken tension, an understanding that neither of us knew how to approach. I had spent so many years seeing her through a professional lens, but after that dinner, I couldn't look at her the same way. It wasn't just the way she had turned heads at the event, it was the quiet confidence she had exuded, the ease with which she navigated that world. It was a world I had built, and yet, she seemed to belong in it just as much as I did. I tried to keep things normal at the office, but it wasn't easy. Whenever I spoke with Emma now, there was a slight hesitation in my voice, a moment where I had to remind myself of our roles. Was I still her boss? Or had that moment in the dining hall changed something deeper? It wasn't just about attraction, although I couldn't ignore the way she made me feel now. It was something about her. Something I hadn't noticed before. There were moments, small ones, when our eyes would meet, and I would see a flicker of recognition between us, like we both knew this unspoken change had occurred, but neither of us knew how to address it. I decided I needed to act. It wasn't fair to either of us to continue with this tension. So, one evening after work, I asked Emma to stay behind. I could tell she was a little surprised. We had never really had private conversations outside of work matters, but tonight felt different. As the last of the office lights flickered off, I closed the door behind us. I sat down at my desk, a little nervous, and gestured for Emma to take a seat. Emma, I began, trying to sound as normal as possible. I wanted to talk about the other night. The dinner. She looked at me with those calm eyes of hers, the ones that had always been so composed, even when I had treated her like just another employee. You were amazing, I continued, feeling a little awkward. I've never seen you like that before. You were so different. She tilted her head slightly, a small, knowing smile playing at the corner of her lips. I was just being myself, she said softly, almost as if she was downplaying the impact of the evening. But I knew better. What had happened at that dinner wasn't something I could easily dismiss. No, Emma, I said, trying to find the right words. You were more than just yourself. You were someone I never expected. You held your own. You were confident, powerful, and elegant. I had no idea you had that in you." She was silent for a moment, her expression unreadable. "I guess I just never thought you saw me that way," she said quietly, almost as if she were trying to understand what I was saying. "Why not?" I asked before I could stop myself. The question was too honest, too real, and yet it hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning. She hesitated before replying. "Because, for so long, I was just the secretary," she said simply, her voice steady but with a hint of vulnerability. I could see the weight of her words. I had never really given her the chance to be anything more than that, and now, it felt like I had missed something crucial all along. I sat there for a moment, reflecting on everything that had happened. I had spent so much time building my career, my wealth, my world, but in doing so, I had completely overlooked the person who had been right in front of me this entire time. Emma wasn't just a secretary. She was a woman who had strength, intelligence, and grace, everything I hadn't realized I had been taking for granted. As the silence stretched between us, I knew that this conversation wasn't going to end here. It was just the beginning of something much bigger. Something that would change both of us. And as we finally broke eye contact, I realized that I wasn't the only one who had underestimated her. She had underestimated herself, too. I sat back in my chair, feeling the weight of everything we had just discussed. The quiet tension that had lingered between Emma and me for days now seemed to have dissipated, but in its place was something much deeper, more uncertain. I couldn't deny the shift in our relationship, both professionally and personally. Emma was no longer just the woman who kept my schedule in order, who answered my calls, or who took care of the mundane tasks I couldn't be bothered with. She was something more now, someone I couldn't easily categorize. The truth was, I had spent so much time focused on my business, on my empire, that I had completely missed who Emma truly was. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I had been wrong about so many things. I hadn't seen her potential. I hadn't seen her as more than a secretary. And I certainly hadn't realized how much she had to offer. As she sat across from me, her calm, composed demeanor remained unchanged, but I could see the faintest hint of something in her eyes. Maybe it was vulnerability, or maybe it was just a glimmer of something new, something that had awakened in her after that dinner. For the first time, I truly saw her. I saw the way she carried herself, the quiet strength in her words, and the depth of her intelligence. Emma wasn't just capable of much more than I had given her credit for, she was already living it. I realized that I wasn't the only one who had underestimated her. She had underestimated herself, too. "I think we've both been holding back," I said, breaking the silence. Emma met my gaze, her eyes steady. "In what way?" she asked, a hint of curiosity in her voice. "In how we see each other," I replied honestly. "I've been blind to your potential, and you've been holding back, too. You've always been more than just my secretary. You're a lot more than that, Emma. And I think it's time we acknowledge it." She didn't speak right away. Her expression was thoughtful, as if she was processing what I had said. After a moment, she finally nodded. "I guess I've always kept my head down. I never really thought about anything more than just doing my job well. And that's exactly why you're so good at it," I said, almost without thinking. "You've always done your job well, but you've never let that define you. I think that's why everyone was so drawn to you the other night. You weren't trying to impress anyone. You just were yourself." There was a pause, and I could see the faintest smile tug at the corners of her lips. "Maybe I just needed to hear that from you," she said softly. The words hit me harder than I expected. I had always thought of myself as someone who had everything figured out, someone who could make people do what needed to be done. But here I was, realizing that the person I had taken for granted all these years, Emma, had something to teach me. She had always known how to be herself, something that I had never fully appreciated. "You've got so much more to offer," I continued, my voice steady. "And I want to help you realize it. Whatever you want to do, wherever you want to go, I'll support you." She looked at me, surprised, but there was something in her eyes now, a sense of possibility. "I don't even know where to start," she admitted. Start by trusting yourself, I said. You've already done everything you need to. Now, it's just about seeing it, embracing it. The conversation left both of us in a reflective silence. There was no immediate solution or grand revelation, but there was something important happening between us. We weren't the same people we had been just days ago. And neither of us knew exactly what the future held, but for the first time, I could feel the potential of what we could become, not just as employer and employee, but as people who had finally seen each other for who we truly were. I left the office that evening feeling more unsettled than usual. I had just had a conversation with Emma that had shifted everything. I had never expected that a simple talk about our roles at work would lead to such a deep realization about ourselves. What was clear now was that neither of us could go back to how things were. I kept thinking about her words, how she had never really thought about doing anything more than her job, how she had kept her head down all these years. She had always been so capable, so focused, but she had never allowed herself to reach for anything beyond the confines of her responsibilities. That night at the dinner had opened my eyes to the truth. Emma had the potential to do so much more, and I had held her back by never truly seeing her for who she was. But now that I recognized it, there was no way I could pretend I didn't know. I wasn't the only one who had been limiting her. I had realized, too, that I had been limiting myself. For so long, I had been so focused on my career, my wealth, and my business that I had neglected the value of personal connections. I had neglected the people who truly mattered. Emma was the perfect example of that. I had taken her for granted. She had been right there in front of me the whole time, quietly making my life easier, yet I never took the time to truly understand her. I could no longer just see her as my secretary. She was far more than that. She had a voice, she had ideas, and she had dreams that I had never asked about. As the days passed, I began to notice the small changes. Emma's confidence seemed to grow by the day. She was no longer just the woman sitting at her desk, typing away or making my appointments. She began to speak up more in meetings, offering insights and suggestions that were smart and insightful. It was as if something had clicked inside her, and she was finally allowing herself to be seen for who she really was. She still had the same calm and composed demeanor, but now there was a spark in her eyes. It was a quiet transformation, but it was impossible to miss. I found myself watching her more often, not just because I was impressed, but because I felt something else, respect. I had always respected her for her work ethic, but now I saw her as an equal. I began to realize that my role as her boss didn't have to mean I held all the answers or all the power. It meant that I had the responsibility to help her grow, to help her see her own potential, just as I had started to see it. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't just about work anymore. There was something else, something unspoken between us. I wasn't sure where it was leading, but I couldn't ignore the way things had changed between us. I didn't know how to act around her anymore, how to relate to her. She was no longer just my secretary. She had become something more, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for that shift. But one thing was certain, whatever happened next, things could never go back to how they were before. We had both crossed a line, and it felt like we were on the edge of something new, something neither of us fully understood. But in that uncertainty, there was a strange excitement. The future was now wide open, and I had no idea where it would take us. Days passed, and things between Emma and I continued to evolve in ways I hadn't expected. She was no longer the quiet secretary I had once known. Each day, her confidence seemed to grow stronger, her voice more assured, and it became impossible not to notice. She began taking on new responsibilities, initiating projects, offering strategic ideas in meetings, and handling situations with a level of professionalism that even some of the top executives at the company would admire. I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride when I saw how much she was thriving. But at the same time, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between us, something unspoken. It wasn't just her rising confidence that was changing the dynamic. It was the way we now interacted. In meetings, our conversations were different. There was an ease in the way we exchanged ideas, a shared respect that hadn't been there before. I started to look at Emma not just as an employee, but as a true partner in the work we were doing. For the first time, I began to realize that she wasn't just contributing to the company, she was shaping it. And yet, with every new step Emma took, I found myself conflicted. I had always prided myself on being in control, being the one who guided and directed everything. But now, I was beginning to question my role in all of this. Was I the leader I had always thought I was, or was I simply someone who had been holding back those around me? The truth was, I had been afraid of letting people like Emma step into their full potential, afraid of what that might mean for me. The more I saw Emma thrive, the more I realized how much I had been limiting her by not seeing her as an equal from the beginning. But it wasn't just about work. There was something deeper between us, something that neither of us had addressed. I found myself thinking about her more often, not just as a colleague, but as a person. I began to wonder what it would be like if we weren't just boss and secretary, if we could be two equals working together, maybe even something more. But the uncertainty that came with these thoughts was paralyzing. I had never been someone to blur the lines between work and personal life. I had always kept those worlds separate, but now, that separation seemed less important. Emma had never once tried to be anything other than herself, and it was that authenticity that had drawn me to her. But I didn't know how to navigate these new feelings. I didn't want to risk the professional relationship we had built, and yet, it felt like there was a bigger connection between us that couldn't be ignored. The next few weeks were filled with a strange tension, a quiet kind of understanding that neither of us was ready to acknowledge. Emma continued to excel, and I continued to watch her, both proud and conflicted. I was stuck in this strange limbo where I couldn't deny what was happening, but I didn't know how to move forward. Every time I thought about talking to her, I hesitated. What could I possibly say that wouldn't complicate things even more? And yet, deep down, I knew that eventually, I would have to confront these feelings. I couldn't keep ignoring them. Emma deserved more than that, more than the uncertainty I was placing on her. The more I reflected on it, the more I understood that this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about us. About what we could become, together. But for now, the future remained uncertain, and I wasn't sure how it would unfold. All I knew was that something had changed, and that change was something neither of us could turn back from. I had spent weeks trying to make sense of everything that had been happening between Emma and me. The more I watched her flourish in her role, the more conflicted I became. She was no longer just my secretary, she was a force to be reckoned with. Her insights, her ability to handle difficult situations with grace, and the way she carried herself were impossible to ignore. But still, there was something more between us, something that lingered in the air, unspoken. I had tried to keep a professional distance, to focus on work, but every time I looked at her, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was changing. It wasn't just the way she had transformed into this confident, capable woman. It was the way I felt about her. Every conversation, every meeting we shared, felt different now. There was a new kind of respect between us, something that went beyond our professional roles. She had become someone I genuinely admired, not just as an employee, but as a person. And it was in those quiet moments, when our eyes met across the room or during our brief exchanges at the office, that I began to realize how deep my feelings had grown. I had never imagined I could feel this way about her, and yet, here I was, questioning everything. How had it happened? When had I stopped seeing her simply as the woman who organized my day and started seeing her as someone much more? As time went on, I tried to stay focused on the work at hand. But no matter how much I tried to bury the emotions bubbling beneath the surface, it was impossible to ignore the connection between us. Every day, Emma became more of a presence in my life, and it wasn't just because of her work. It was because of the way she made me feel, challenged, inspired, and more alive than I had felt in years. But despite everything, I couldn't bring myself to confront her about what was happening between us. I was afraid. Afraid of losing what we had, afraid of ruining the professional relationship we had worked so hard to build. But the more I held back, the more I realized that I couldn't continue like this. I couldn't ignore how much she had come to mean to me. One evening, after a particularly long day at the office, I found myself standing in front of her desk, staring at her. She looked up from her work, her eyes meeting mine, and I could tell she knew something was different. The air between us was thick with the unsaid, with the weight of everything we had both been avoiding. "Emma," I said, my voice quieter than usual, "we need to talk." Her expression shifted, and for the first time in a long while, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "About what?" she asked, her voice calm but curious. "About us," I replied, feeling a rush of nervousness that surprised me. "I don't know what's happening, but I can't keep pretending it's not there. The way I feel about you, the way we've been working together, it's changing. And I need to be honest with you about it." Emma didn't speak right away, and for a moment, I thought she might brush me off. But then, to my surprise, she put down the papers in front of her, leaned back in her chair, and looked at me with the same calm intensity that had always been there. "I felt it too," she said softly. My heart skipped a beat. The words were simple, but they meant everything. For the first time, we were both acknowledging what had been building between us. It wasn't just an unspoken tension, it was something real, something that had the potential to change everything. "So, what do we do about it?" she asked, her voice steady but filled with curiosity. I didn't have an answer right away. The truth was, I wasn't sure where this was going or what it meant for the future of our professional relationship. But what I did know was that I couldn't keep pretending it wasn't there. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice quieter now. "But I think it's time we figure it out." There was silence between us, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that spoke volumes. And in that moment, I knew that whatever happened next, things would never be the same again. We were no longer just employer and employee. We were something more, something undefined, but real. And for the first time, I felt a sense of clarity. I didn't know where this would take us, but I was ready to find out. The silence lingered between Emma and me, but it wasn't uncomfortable. There was a calmness in knowing we had finally acknowledged what had been building between us. The unspoken tension, the new dynamic, everything was out in the open now. I had no idea where this was going, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the uncertainty. We had taken the first step in figuring out what was happening, and that alone felt like a weight had been lifted. Emma sat there, calm and composed as always, but there was a new light in her eyes, a softness I hadn't noticed before. It wasn't just the way she spoke now, it was the way she was looking at me, as if she was seeing me in a new light, too. "What happens next?" she asked after a moment, breaking the silence. I could feel the weight of her question, and for the first time, I realized how much we both had to figure out. "I don't know," I admitted, trying to put my thoughts into words. "But I know we can't ignore it anymore. We need to be honest with each other, about everything. And maybe we can figure it out as we go." She nodded, her gaze never leaving mine. "I agree," she said softly. "But we also need to be careful. We don't want to ruin what we've built here." Her words were measured, and I knew she was right. Our professional relationship was the foundation of everything. It had always been about respect, trust, and mutual understanding. I didn't want to jeopardize that, but at the same time, I couldn't deny what had changed between us. "I don't want to ruin anything either," I said, my voice steady. "But I also don't want to keep pretending like nothing is different. It's not just about our work anymore. It's about how we feel. And I think we deserve to explore that, to see where it could go." There was a long pause as Emma considered my words. I could see the wheels turning in her head, as if she was weighing the possibilities, unsure of what to say next. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never expected this. I never thought this would happen. But I can't ignore it, either. Something has changed, and I don't want to keep running from it." Hearing her say that made my heart race. I had expected her to hesitate, to hold back, but she didn't. She was facing it head-on, just like she always had with everything else. That was part of what I had come to admire about her, her strength, her honesty, and her willingness to confront difficult things, even when they were messy. "Then let's figure it out," I said, feeling a sense of resolve. "We don't have all the answers yet, but we don't have to have them all right now." The important thing is that we're being honest with each other, and we're willing to see where this takes us." Emma's eyes softened, and she gave a small nod. "I'm willing to see where it goes, too," she said. I couldn't help but smile, feeling a mix of relief and excitement. This wasn't the end of the road. It was just the beginning of something new, something neither of us could predict. The future was uncertain, but that uncertainty no longer felt like a burden. It felt like a possibility. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the unknown. I was ready to face it, with Emma by my side, figuring it all out together. As the days passed, Emma and I found ourselves navigating uncharted territory. The conversations we had were no longer just about business, they were deeper, more personal. It wasn't just about work anymore, it was about who we were, how we felt, and what we could become. The lines between professional and personal were beginning to blur, and we both knew it. But there was still a sense of caution in the air. We hadn't figured everything out yet. There were still questions left unanswered, still uncertainties that hung over us. How would this affect our work? How would it change the dynamic between us? Despite these questions, the connection between us was undeniable. I could feel it in the way we spoke to each other, the way we shared ideas, and the way we supported one another. Emma had always been more than just my secretary, but now I saw her in an entirely new light. She was smart, capable, and incredibly strong. But more than that, she had this quiet strength about her that made me admire her even more. She wasn't afraid to step up, to speak her mind, or to take charge when needed. I realized that I had been the one holding us back, not her. For so long, I had kept her in a box, never truly seeing her potential. But now, I was seeing her for who she really was. And I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of respect for her. Emma, too, seemed to be changing. She was more confident, more willing to take risks, and more open about her thoughts and ideas. It was as if something had unlocked inside her, something that had been there all along but was only now coming to the surface. She was no longer the quiet, reserved woman I had once known. She had become someone I could rely on, someone I could trust, and someone I could work alongside as an equal. We were no longer just boss and secretary, we were partners, in every sense of the word. But even as we grew closer, there was still an underlying tension. Neither of us knew exactly where this was going or what the future held. We were both feeling our way through it, trying to figure out what came next. And yet, despite the uncertainty, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was the beginning of something important, something that would change everything for both of us. One afternoon, as we sat in the office together, discussing an upcoming project, I couldn't help but notice how easy it felt to work with her now. There was no hesitation, no awkwardness, just a smooth, natural flow of ideas and collaboration. It was then that I realized that, whatever happened between us, we had built something solid. We had built a foundation of trust, respect, and understanding that went far beyond our professional roles. And as much as I had been afraid of where this might lead, I knew now that it was worth exploring. We didn't have all the answers yet, but that didn't matter. We were on this journey together, and that was enough for me. As I looked at Emma, her eyes focused on the project in front of her, I couldn't help but smile. This was just the beginning. We had no idea what the future held, but for the first time, I felt ready to face it, whatever it might bring. We were no longer just two people working together. We were something more. And as I watched her work, I knew one thing for sure: I was ready to see where this would take us. In this captivating journey of personal and professional growth, a millionaire finds himself unexpectedly transformed by his own secretary, an ordinary woman who becomes extraordinary in his eyes. This tale is part of a broader genre of millionaire stories that explore the unpredictable dynamics of relationships between powerful individuals and those who serve them. What begins as a simple business arrangement soon turns into a story of mutual respect, self-discovery, and breaking down barriers. As the millionaire learns to see his secretary in a new light, he uncovers hidden depths that change not only his perception of her but also his outlook on life. Their relationship evolves, but the journey is filled with uncertainties as they navigate their shifting roles. These millionaire stories capture the essence of human connection and transformation, reminding us that sometimes, the most unexpected people have the power to reshape our worlds. This particular story illustrates how the line between personal and professional can blur, revealing a deeper connection that neither party can ignore. As the millionaire and his secretary become equals, they face the challenges of their new reality, but also embrace the possibilities that lie ahead, making this one of the most compelling millionaire stories to date. Through twists and turns, this story highlights the power of self-realization, and how seeing someone for who they truly are can change everything. It is a testament to the idea that even in the world of millionaires, the most profound transformations come from within, driven by the people we least expect. As they move forward, their connection becomes a powerful force, making their story one that resonates deeply with those who have ever felt underestimated or unseen. This is just one example of the kind of millionaire stories that challenge our perceptions of wealth, power, and human potential.